So, first of all, I guess I want to talk about what's happening in Cuba. What's happening in Cuba is America has put on yet another hold, yet another blockade on the ability of the Cuban people to live their lives, to access their basic needs. Trump says US is starting to talk to Cuba as he moves to cut its oil supplies. So after they kidnapped Maduro in January, they've been moving in a very confrontational manner. And again, their goal is regime change. They're trying to get the Cuban government out by any means necessary. And their sanctions, their blockades, all these different things, they claim it's for the regime and to stop the regime. It's not about the regime, which, is a charged word in itself, right? Because regime tends to be applied to countries and governments that America doesn't like. Not to say that the governments are not, bad. I'm not a fan of governments. That should be obvious. But that label of regime gets applied, I think, to very specific cases because America is arguably a regime. So the Cuban government, they're trying to get the Cuban government out, and so they're squeezing them. But it's really not about squeezing the government. It's about squeezing the people. It's about making the people suffer. That's what sanctions do, right? Sanctions on countries, in many cases, don't even touch the elites, right? Or the elites find ways to get around those sanctions. It's the common people who suffer from the sanctions. So recent moves cut off its oil supplies, squeeze the island. Trump signed an executive order to impose a tariff on any goods from countries that sell or provide oil to Cuba. The move put pressure on Mexico, which Cuba became dependent on for oil after Trump halted oil shipments from Venezuela in the wake of Maduro's ouster. Right, this Jacobin article is also talking about Washington's war on Cuba is collective punishment. Again, they've made it very clear that their intention is to make ordinary Cubans suffer. As one Republican puts it, no one is indifferent to that pain, the pain of a mother's hunger, a child in need of help. But that is precisely the brutal dilemma we face as exiles, to alleviate short-term suffering or to free Cuba forever. A lot of these quote-unquote exiles, for one, a lot of them fled under Batista. I think that's become common knowledge now, not under Castro. And a lot of them fled due to desegregation taking place in Cuba. So not to say that everybody who flees Cuba is a worm, a gusano, as the term that they would use, but some of the most reactionary Cubans in the world seem to be concentrated in Florida, bro. Like, oh my god. It's like, yes, make my people suffer. So I honestly take what they say with a grain of salt. Obviously, the Cuban government has its problems, but the biggest problem that Cuban people are facing and continue to face is the United States government and its decades-long suffocation of Cubans as a people. As this article is saying, collective punishment. It's deliberate starvation. It's an attempt to squeeze the entire population, right? And all for the sake of, control over oil. I think that there have been attempts to get the US to leave Cuba alone, right? At the UN Assembly on October 30th, 2024, 187 countries voted for a non-binding resolution to end the economic, commercial, and financial embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. This resolution has passed with near unanimous support every year except 2020, since the fall of the Soviet Union, which deprived Cuba of a major trading partner and plunged the nation of 10 million into an economic depression known as the Special Period. Since then, it's been rocked by natural disasters, migration crises, sabotage efforts, a global pandemic, and yet Cubans have, trucked on. Not only have they trucked on, they've continued to support people around the world. They've continued to support the medical needs of their Caribbean neighbors and the independence efforts of their global comrades, and so basically every country in the world has been trying to get this embargo off of Cuba, right? The US can choose not to trade with Cuba if they want, but they're going beyond just choosing not to trade with Cuba. They are trying to leverage, and they have been leveraging their outsized role in the global economy to basically prevent other people from engaging with Cuba. So every country in the world has been trying to get this embargo off of Cuba. Everybody except the US and Israel, twins for life, right? But, America hates people who don't do what they want, how they want, when they want. America continues to uphold this Monroe Doctrine that dictates that the Americas is its backyard and it could do with it what it wishes. And the Cubans are suffering as a result. They do not have the ability to exercise their self-determination because of this imperialist imposition. And the international community, we really have to go beyond words. Russia has claimed that it is sending oil as humanitarian aid. China recently set up solar facilities in Cuba. None of this is enough, right? The transition to solar is going to take time. Have not made that transition fully. No country in the world should be on oil in big 2026, but unfortunately the transition has been feet dragging, and that transition is not going to be facilitated easily when a country is under the level of sanctions and embargo and American bullying that Cuba is under. I want people to exercise their freedom of speech and their freedom of assembly and their freedom of association, all these different things. I want them to be able to exercise their ability to decide how they want to organize a society. That cannot be explored to the fullest extent. That has not been able to be explored to the fullest extent possible in Cuba because of this American imposition. And for all the disagreements I have with particular methods of revolution, at the end of the day, my opposition continues to be towards American imperialism first and foremost, towards imperialism around the world first and foremost, American or otherwise. And so all these declarations and talks about resolutions that, yeah, you have to get off of Cuba's back, America. Yeah, America, you meanie. I don't care about that kind of talk anymore. I don't really applaud talk, I applaud action, right? China had like a foreign minister visiting, or no, let me actually open that link and not read based off of the headline alone. Right, China fully supports Cuba in safeguarding national sovereignty and security and opposes unwarranted interference by external forces, Chinese foreign minister told his Cuban counterpart on Thursday as the US tightens the screws on the other nation. China does not... China is like all about that money. You know, that's how they tend to move, I feel, on the global stage. But China does this talk, and then every once in a while they do something to support another country, obviously for their own interests. But China, I don't think is going to come and save Cuba at this point in time. Remains to be seen how much those Russian oil shipment is going to help Cuba, if it even reaches Cuba. But I'm just so frustrated by just the failure of everything. Like, America just continues to bully the entire world. Nobody is doing enough to stand up to them. Mexico was supplying Cuba, and now what they're afraid to stand up to America, as if America is not as dependent on Mexico as Mexico is dependent on America. If Mexico stands up, and if all the countries of the region stood up against America, there's nothing America could have done about it. But instead we have all of these sycophants in some of these government positions. You have people like Milei in Argentina and Kamala in Trinidad who are just sucking up to the Trump administration and to their imperialist ambitions in the region. And within America, I'm once again asking, you know, you're in the belly of the beast, as the saying goes. Americans, for the past few decades, the world has been waiting on you, in a sense, to mobilize, to dismantle the Hydra from within, to engage in radical action, not just for yourselves and your own workers' protections and interests, which depressingly has not been mustered to the extent that it should yet, but to even go beyond just that and to think about, you know, international solidarity. The American revolutionary milieu has a long way to go, and so I just implore each of you to please keep working at it, to please keep on setting up those networks and developing the infrastructure that is going to be capable of disrupting this beast from within. Again, I talk about a lot of this stuff on Social Revolution, on the channel. You can look into it. Liberate yourself and liberate your comrades around the world. It's all intertwined. The whole struggle is intertwined. Western governments are not coming to save us. Eastern governments are not coming to save us. We have to develop that international solidarity to save ourselves. So get to work.